This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. The road for Rob Hotaling to secure the Independent Party nomination for governor received some scrutiny, leading to an unsuccessful court challenge by Republican candidate Bob Stefanowski to keep Hotaling and his running mate Chip Beckett off the ballot. Today, Where We Live, Rob Hotaling joins us to explain why he's running. We hear the differences between him and the two major party candidates. Historically, independent party candidates have garnered just a small minority of votes here in Connecticut, but the unaffiliated continue to be the largest and growing population of voters in our state. Now, what questions do you have for our state's independent gubernatorial candidate? Our conversation isn't limited to our live radio stream. You can also watch online at Connecticut Public's website, Facebook page, or on YouTube. Or you can call in with your question. Here's the number, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR, or you can find us again on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Rob Hotaling, welcome to our show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Lucy.
So some of our listeners and viewers, it might be the first time that they're learning about you and why you're running. So let's start first to let our listeners know more about your background, how you ended up in Connecticut, and what do you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a 25-year resident of Connecticut. I moved here right out of high school. So actually, it's kind of funny. My father, it's during the dot-com era. And my father calls me up and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" It was the high school year of my graduation. And he says, I got some investment, and you should come on down and learn how to code. So I'm like, okay. So I hopped in a car, moved into his house in Westport, and I was coding JavaScript. It doesn't matter what the software is, but the point was, it was good times. It was fun. We were competing with two very large companies, IBM and Oracle. I didn't know what that meant at the time, and which meant we were going to lose. But it was a great experience. And at that time, I was also attending University of Connecticut, where I met my wife, and she was just the most beautiful engineer, and I just haven't left Connecticut since. And so over the years, I've lived in Manchester, East Hartford, Storrs naturally, and then Bridgeport, and now I live in Cheshire. And so we have 4 beautiful kids, 3 boys, 1 girl.
And you're a banker?
I am a banker, yeah. So I'm actually a technology leader in the banking space. So essentially, I'm a senior vice president at Webster Bank now, but I've had a broad experience in finance. So I've worked in wholesale credit transformation. That might not mean a lot to people out there, but I currently do what's called retail online banking. So if you go and you want to log in and, open up a checking account or savings account, things like that, my group would handle the digital piece of it. And I work with other bank leaders to make sure that your money movement occurs if you try to pay a bill or whatever. Mm-hmm. So very important stuff. And I'm really proud of the organization I work for and them giving me the opportunity to even be here.
And so everyone's wondering, why are you running for governor?
Actually, I think my situation might be a little bit different than my competitors. I was asked to run. I really wasn't thinking about it. But I had sort of, talking, I'm sure I could run the state better than than Governor Lamont or better than Mr. Stefanowski. And essentially, the chairman of the party, independent party, so I had left the Republicans. I was a little frustrated with everything going on, and I became an unaffiliated. Which is like most of our population in Connecticut. But then I met the chairman of the independent party, and he said, "Rob, we have 8 people who want this line, and they've traditionally cross-endorsed." He goes, including the governor and Bob Stefanowski, but we believe you're the best one to represent the party for various reasons. And so some of those reasons very quickly are, I come from a broad background, not just from finance, but from gunshot detection, physical security. I've done patent and trademark search. I've done food automation. I've done Concedo gaming. So people go, wow. And then I come from a very multicultural background. My father's Dutch. My mother is Liberian. My wife is Puerto Rican. So I just feel like, so I think that the leadership of the party felt that I represented a lot of different things. And then also the ability for me, I guess, to relate to people and communicate. And they felt that I should run, but I didn't know I'd get into the quagmire that occurred with the lawsuits, and that was not on the plan for me.
So we'll get to that, but when we hear about your background, you have no experience in governance. And so I'm wondering if you can talk more about why people think that you could lead the state as governor.
That is a good question. So, a couple things about that. I don't have candidate experience prior to this, but I have campaign experience. So, in my 20s, I was actually part of the Young Dems of Southern Fairfield. And that organization was actually led by Allison Malloy, the niece of Governor Malloy. He was the mayor of Stanford at the time. So I had contributed. So in my 20s, I was part of the Democratic Party. So unlike my competitors, I've been part of both parties. So at the time, I was in what's called data and strategy, and I saw from the inside what a gubernatorial campaign looks like. And it was a successful campaign. Malloy ended up winning. I think that was 2010 when he won. And I, in my own little way, I would gather up data from essentially voter lists from all the town and city councils. I'd load it into a database. It wasn't readily online like it is now. And then I would apply, little algorithms and say, this is where we should spend our time, money, and effort. So, but now people could say, well, that doesn't make you a good candidate per se. What would make you more qualified to lead the state? And I would argue that given my background, I've been a proven problem solver at high levels of scale. Right now, I lead systems that handle billions of dollars in money movement. So it's other people's money, not my own. I may not be a multimillionaire, but I'm definitely an innovator and a listener and a collaborator. I believe I stand the best chance of taking the best ideas from both parties. Unlike my competitors who are beholden to the left or the right, I'm the only one who can break the blue-red divide and take the best. And actually being part of both those parties makes it even better. So a lot of my platform are really beholden to the best ideas, not the parties.
You're hearing Rob Hotaling here where we live. He's the Independent Party's gubernatorial candidate. You can join us if you have a question or comment, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. I think some people like to hear that you see yourself as somebody that can take the middle ground and not go extreme right or extreme left. But you are a minor party candidate in a political system that favors the two-party system, including the money involved. And so what can you tell our listeners about how they should view your candidacy as credible?
Yeah, once again, I would argue that the independent party, although I'm on the independent party line, we actually represent the unaffiliated the most. So most listeners and viewers and voters may not understand this, but 41% of the electorate, over 900,000 people, are registered unaffiliated. They're unaffiliated for a reason. It means they do not want to align to the Republicans or the Democrats. There's a reason for that. And that means they control the fate of the election, not the Democrats and Republicans. So really, if the unaffiliated say, we like Rob Hotaling better, I win. It's that simple. So folks really need to understand that. I would also add this, that most unaffiliated have something very unfair from the two-party system that they don't even recognize right now. We have what's called closed primaries. So the unaffiliated are taxpayers. Taxpayer money is spent to conduct and facilitate the primaries by the Democrats and Republicans. So you have 900,000 people who pay for something who can't contribute. So I'm a big fan from the third-party system of, and I'm championing open primaries. So if you're registered unaffiliated, you'll be able to select one of which primaries that you'd like to vote in. That is critical because out of those primaries determines who gets to the general election. And people may not understand why electoral reform is so important, and I'll just stop on this point. It's foundational. Why? Because you can't even bring new ideas to the table. Traditionally, third-party candidates are the ones who bring the most progressive or newest ideas to the table, not the major parties. And I would also, and I love my Lieutenant Governor partner, Dr. Stuart Chip Beckett. He informed me, and I didn't know this, Abraham Lincoln was a third-party candidate. I don't know if most viewers recognize that, but think about that. One of our greatest, if not greatest presidents was a third-party candidate.
Again, you can join us if you have a question for Rob Hodeling here where we live, the Independent Party gubernatorial candidate at 888-720-9677 or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. So let's talk about how you got the nomination through the Connecticut Independent Party. In some ways, the fact that Republican candidate Bob Stefanowski tried to boot you off of the ballot after this tie was broken by the Independent Party chair. In some ways, it helped raise your awareness of the listeners and voters that you're running for governor. And so I'm wondering if you can talk about, this challenge. Of course, it was unsuccessful, but in terms of when we think about the two-party system and choice, the move to try to get you off the ballot.
Yeah, first of all, and thank you for asking. Rewinding back to the caucus, no one would have imagined it would be a tie. I think most people thought, oh, he's spending a lot of money. He has a lot of money. He spent a lot of money. And I get it. If I'm in his position, I'd say, you know what? I deserve this. Why? Because the past 2 or 3 Republican governor candidates had received that line. So they felt entitled to it. But prior to me, there wasn't really a strong governor candidate that's actually an independent party member running. So it made sense. Let's cross and doors. But the party made clear from the beginning that they wanted their own gubernatorial candidate, and that was me. And they asked me to run again. So it's like sort of stand down. But you know what? He galvanized not just me in my campaign, as well as the party, but the general public who are part of the independent party, and they realized, wait, I'm not just an affiliate of an independent party. I'm going to come vote. And we had a tie. So the thing that most folks may not understand is, although it didn't say anything about a tie because nobody imagined that, it still mentioned, the bylaws, or the I'm referring to, mentioned that the state central committee would make the determination of breaking the tie. They had already endorsed me 2 nights before. So naturally, that means that there would be the tie-breaking vote. But then after that, of course, for Stefanowski to pursue removing the party entirely from the line, I don't think most people understand what that challenge might have occurred, what that would have done. Essentially, that would have put the entire party off of the ballot, myself and Dr. Stuart Beckett included. But then that also would have removed the 3rd largest party in the entire state from the election cycle. Based on the Citizens Election Program, the state match program, you need to get at least 10% to even get state match. And it's based on your last run. That would have put the party 8 years behind if you would have won. Is that good for democracy of Connecticut? That's not the type of state I want to live in.
Again, you can join us if you have a question for Rob Hodeling, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Barbara is calling in from Glastonbury. Barbara, what's your question?
My question for Mr. Hodeling is, I live in Glastonbury. We have a great education system, but I've served on the board in Hartford, a number of organizations, and I've seen what's happened to kids, and that the education isn't as good, and across the state it's that way. We've got great systems, and we've got systems that are really challenging, and I was wondering, what do we need to do to get everybody on a great playing field so there's more people that want to stay here and work here? Yes, that's my question.
Well, thanks, Barbara. I think that's a great question. A couple things. One, if I understand this right, Connecticut spends about $5 billion a year, the state, on education. And we do have one of the highest ranking school systems in the country, which is, I believe, 8th or 9th ranked, something like this. But we also have, if not the worst achievement gap, definitely bottom 5. And it's a problem. And a lot of it's tied to the wrong metrics. My personal belief and the campaign's belief is that, for example, our educational cost sharing or ECS funding model needs to be restructured. I'm one of the few candidates who's actually taken a deep look at that with my team and believe that it's currently based on income and property taxes rather than on actual student achievement, which is really mostly determined from classroom size and student-teacher ratios. The better that ratio, the more attention to each child, the more the child progresses in schooling. And then augmenting that with additional forms of education. I think that, and I've heard both Bob and Ned go back and forth about pitting parents against teachers. I think that's just, that whole debate is just, it's a falsehood. I think from the beginning, parents and teachers have always been in coordination. I just think that we need to take a look at, and you'll see our educational plan is coming out today. We're publishing it today. We believe that we should have more of a county-based regional delivery of services for certain things to take the burden off of teachers. Certain areas, for example, RECs, Regional Education Councils. For example, there's CREC in Hartford. They deliver training for teachers. They deliver, they maintain magnet schools. It's more of at a county level, a regional distribution level. That unburdens some school systems. And then we have the concept of COGS, which are essentially councils of government. They did, at a more regional level, disperse infrastructure in schooling. Again, that would help schools focus on educating kids. One last area that I strongly believe in terms of education to put ourselves on the right playing field is just the focus. I know we talk a lot about STEM, and I am from technology, but I've heard a new one called STEAM. I would add that arts right in the middle. So science, technology, arts, engineering, and math. We need to have STEAM. And lastly, financial literacy. That's a big one for me. I think that there's a huge gap, and we can see it. And coming from the finance world, I get it. But does the average person even understand what a checking account, a savings account is, what a mortgage, what a line of credit is? Those types of concepts should be sprinkled in over time, sort of like language arts. It should be financial education. Once you add all of these various, you unburden the teachers and you add this type of approach to the curriculum, I think that will be an even better school system, and then we won't see the tale of two cities we have in Connecticut, where Westport has a 1% dropout rate, but a few towns over, Bridgeport has a 25% dropout rate. We need to do more for our kids.
We'll be breaking soon, but I wanted to go back to something you said about a regional county approach. Excuse me. But that's not how Connecticut municipal governments are set up. There's a reason they call Connecticut the land of steady habits. Is there buy-in from cities and towns, especially the suburbs, where people that are living, higher middle class to wealthy, where they want to be collaborating with the poor district next door? I mean, that is a real problem in the state. And so how do you get that buy-in if you're governor?
Yeah, so I think that's the thing. And I also hear that from our competitors, my competitors, that, I can sort of tell a town what to do. No, you have to be in partnership with the town, right? And again, I stand the best as a moderate, as a middle, as an independent, working regardless of the election of that mayor or town council. I can go to those folks and say, listen, let's work in partnership. And now from this point about towns working together from an educational basis. So going back to my Bridgeport, Westport example, there are some incentives for Westport to help Bridgeport. But when you really get down to it, do they have to? No, they don't. It's just out of the goodness of Westport's heart that they would want to help Bridgeport, right? But the point is, if you raise it up a level and say, and you show a cost-benefit analysis, it's more costly if we don't work together. And you have better benefits overall from a society if we do work together. And you incentivize those mayors at a regional level. Not that you're taking away any character from Westport, or not that you're applying what you're, sort of telling Bridgeport what you're going to do per se. What you're saying is, hey, everybody, we believe that when you raise it up one level and do regional delivery of services, it benefits everybody. And that's one of the key things to my educational plan.
You mentioned character, and that's something that suburbs, some towns bring up related to the push to have more multifamily units, apartments, affordable housing. But what are we really talking about here when we're talking about character? Is that what people are worried about, or is it the fact that they don't want somebody that doesn't look like them, that doesn't come from their economic backgrounds, living next to them in their town?
Yeah, I think there's, we can't get away from that. I think there's a little bit of that. Look, even I've probably experienced it once or twice in my life. It just happens, right? I moved to Cheshire out of Bridgeport. I mean, but of course they don't know your background until okay, wait, you're a banker, okay. But it shouldn't be that way. But I will say it's a minority. I think majority of people still want the same things. They want a good school system. They want safety. They want a great neighborhood. They want beauty. Connecticut's beautiful. They want to maintain that. So I think folks are concerned. And at the debate, you sort of heard this joke. I wanted to laugh where skyscrapers next to Cape Cods. But the point is that developers have too much power and control in terms of affordable housing in the 830G statutes and all that. So I think what we need to do is level the playing field. I do believe that certain towns want a vibrant downtown, and it makes sense to build your multifamily units there. But if the town says, you know what, we think it might make more sense to put a multifamily unit elsewhere, clearly the folks who come and live in those multifamily units are typically, it's affordable housing. They make less, they earn less, but it's about equity. It's about equality. It's about giving people the same opportunities. I think everybody wants that in the state of Connecticut, not just the select few.
I definitely want to ask you some follow-up on your comments about 830G, but we need to take a break. Again, I want to remind our listeners that you're listening to Where We Live. Independent Party gubernatorial candidate Rob Hotaling is my in-studio guest today. He's here to answer your questions. We're live on the radio, online at Connecticut Public's website, Facebook page, or on YouTube. You can add your questions there or just call in 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live.
You're listening because you stand with the facts. Thank you.
Support comes from Walden Local Meat, offering home delivery of grass-fed beef, chicken, pork, and wild Atlantic seafood, all responsibly raised by local farmers. Walden Local is committed to building a more sustainable food system. WaldenLocalMeat.com.
I'm Kyone Wolf, host of Audacious on Connecticut Public, here with my producer Jessica Severin D. Martinez. I know we've got a great idea for a show when it makes my heart skip a beat. What's it feel like for you, Jessica?
It feels like the time I bungee jumped. I was a little nervous, but it left me feeling changed.
See what we mean on Audacious, Connecticut Public's fully human radio show, at 10 a.m. Saturdays, 11 p.m. on Wednesdays, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The best public media has to offer is on demand. Thrilling dramas, eye-opening documentaries, awe-inspiring nature and science shows. You can watch them all with PBS Passport. Passport is an exclusive benefit for members who donate $5 a month or more. Stream it on your TV, phone, computer, or tablet. It's easy. Amazing discoveries and adventures await. Donate online at ctpublic.org and start watching today.
Connecticut Public Radio's news reports are made possible by Regional Hospice and the Little Theatre of Manchester. Listen for news reports on Morning Edition and All Things Considered.
This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. About 33 days to go before the general election in Connecticut, November 8th. Today we wrap up our series talking with Connecticut's gubernatorial candidates on November's ballot. What questions do you have for Rob Hotaling, the Independent Party's candidate for governor? We're live on the radio, online at Connecticut Public's website, Facebook page, or on YouTube. Add your questions there or call in 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. Or again, find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Before we take another call, you mentioned 830G. This was a law that requires developers to follow certain guidelines before bringing in certain projects and allowing affordable housing. You'd mentioned that developers have too much power. So unpack that a little bit more for us, because there is an affordability housing crisis in our state. Yeah. There is a lack of affordable housing in particular communities. Some advocates would say, it's not just about talking about putting these units in cities, but making sure that people have access to housing where they live, working families, working professionals. So tell us more about how you would fix this issue.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is, the 10% requirement. There's this whole debate about, 1 or 2 acres and what are we doing there. But fundamentally, what is it about? It's about access. And so in giving opportunities to folks to live in the towns they work. And I think we should do everything we can to make that happen. So one of the things is, and I've heard Bob Stefanowski talk about repealing 830G. I just think that's not possible to get that through the legislature and then put what in its place. I think we have to restructure it. And really what I believe is we need to level the playing field between developers and towns. Towns want more say. Developers are trying to do the right thing, just like towns want to do the right thing. Towns are listening to the people who want to live there. If you're already working there and you want to live in that town, I think you should be able to participate with that town's leadership and say, hey, what are you doing? And work in partnership. So one of the key things that I was looking at is, and I understand even the governor was here some weeks ago, where those plans are shared with the administration. Now, I become governor. I would do the same. I would take a good look at it, but I would make it an emphasis. I would make it a priority. I don't know if it's really a priority for our current administration. I don't get the sense it is. They say a lot of nice words, but where's the action? How many towns have they met? Have they gone to every single town who doesn't have a plan yet? If I understand this right, 50% of our towns haven't even submitted a plan. Is that either just lack of priority or a lack of respect? I don't know what's going on there.
Or maybe both.
Oh, maybe both, right. So, but I definitely think that we need to take a look at that. Under my leadership, I would make a commitment to meet with all the various towns and then work with the legislation, put together a bill that would restructure it to make sure that we have the proper access for everyone to get those opportunities to live in those towns.
Again, you can join us 888-720-9677 or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Let's talk about the economy. We know that the inflation rate is high. People, depending on their household income, may be living paycheck to paycheck. People are noticing that the amount of disposable income they have is much less than what it used to be. And so what are your plans to help Connecticut residents as we see this inflation rate high? Some economists say we're in a recession now, even though it hasn't been officially called. And so I'm curious your thoughts, especially because you come from the private sector.
Yeah, and I think that there's sometimes a misunderstanding of inflation and what state governments can actually do to control it. Inflation essentially is too much demand for the supply. And that typically affects things like food, fuel, toiletries, various types of goods and services. And I should try to break this down a little bit, unpack and what we can actually do to make it long-term fixes and improvements. But there's a couple ways to affect inflation. One is with monetary policy, essentially making money more expensive, which lowers so when the Fed, who actually controls inflation, and the way they do this is they increase interest rates, which takes money out of the system, it cools the economy, and it makes banks like Webster or others lend less. That makes money less available, which cools it down. That means that demand drops generally. So, but from a state level, what can you do? There's fiscal policy. There's a couple ways of addressing that. There is either raising taxes, again, to cool off people from wanting to spend, which lowers demand. It balances it with supply, which will drop inflation. The other way is really to control your spending. That's a whole nother thing. So that would possibly mean cutting certain services. So there's different things. But then yet there's another way, which is really supply at the end of the day. If we can increase our production of certain impactful goods and services, or goods and services impacted by inflation most, and build safeguards there, that might be another way to fight inflation. So I understand that we have a gas tax holiday, essentially. It's going to be expiring in November. There's a lot of debate about extending it. I think we ought to extend it, first of all, to give people that relief. But we also ought to look at other safeguards that we can for fuel prices, which affect a lot of our transportation and our working force. But then also I'd look at food. We come from a great state. We have a lot of farms. We just don't manufacture enough here. We don't warehouse enough here. And if we could offset some of that in a regional-based manner, we may also insulate ourselves a little bit more from inflation. So those are just a couple different scenarios that we can do.
You've also called attention to Connecticut not being seen as business friendly. You have some proposals to help attract more businesses to our state. I'm wondering if you can briefly lay out some of that for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that, and I've been I've started up a few businesses myself, and I've also worked at very large corporations as well as small startups and family-owned businesses. Everyone's feeling it. The cost of doing business, we're just basically unfriendly. And I've heard Stefanowski now take it. I think he took a look at my plan and saw the CNBC rankings I put right on my plan on my website. But we have an F. We have Fs and Ds on our report card according to CNBC when it comes to things like the economy and when it comes to like infrastructure. So my plan, basically, let me summarize it, is this. We will address cost of doing business and the cost of living. A couple of ways that we will be addressing cost of doing business right now are business personal property taxes. We're looking at eliminating those or dramatically reducing them. Our default position would be complete elimination. Another one would be motor vehicle taxes that businesses spend on. If we can eliminate those, we need to go from, and I want to be clear about this, right now Connecticut, a majority of its revenues are based on assets, having something, or being something. I believe that our state should be based on use or utilization, buying something, doing something, rather than just being something. It's a fundamental shift. And really what would occur is if you do less, you pay less. You do more, you pay more. That's far more fair, in my opinion. That's one of the things our economic plan would look at doing.
There's a story happening this week where Governor Lamont and other Connecticut leaders are putting pressure on M&T Bank after its merger with People's Bank. Again, 325 workers have been laid off, another 333 expected in the future. I should say M&T Bank says it's also planning to hire for another 350 jobs. As governor, how would you handle that situation? What control does a governor have over what a private business is doing, including acquisition and their business plan moving forward?
Right. And personally, I feel it's very reactionary. It's not like it wasn't, and look, we're going through a bank merger right now, right? And M&T and Peoples, everyone knew it. And so you have to have trust. It's the private sector. But if there were certain incentives delivered to M&T or certain commitments by M&T for employment, I believe, if I heard the number right, they are intended to maintain a certain level of set of employees, 300 or 1,000. And I'm well aware, too, that Governor Lamont met with the CEO of M&T either today or yesterday. As governor, for me, especially understanding the private sector, especially banking and finance, I would work with them and say, hey, what can we do to make a smooth transition? What can we do to ensure ahead of, proactively, not reactively? And then also just, with the Attorney General even, there are a lot of lawsuits, if I understand this right, flowing into the Attorney General. I would take a look at that and go, what is the common thread? What is the common theme? Rather than being a hammer, be more of a partner with the business community and say, okay, where can we get others to maybe help and smooth this transition? So it's not all just on the local environment and specifically what M&T are doing.
We have a listener who tweeted, in a state where we saw Newtown happen, and this December will be 10 years since that tragic shooting at the Sandy Hook Elementary School. This state has an assault weapon ban, also tougher gun laws than we see in other states. What are your thoughts on police in schools?
Well, this is a really challenging thing. And you mentioned Newtown. A very quick story. I founded a company called Verbi. It was a gunshot detection. It was really the first to be installed. No human intervention whatsoever. I repurposed military-grade gunshot detectors that are used by our special forces overseas, and I miniaturized them and I made them look like smoke detectors. Through that process, it really taught me a lot about school safety and various solutions, what I would call non-intrusive school solutions. We can't turn our schools into fortresses. That is not good for education, but we have to make sure, ensure that our students, teachers, and administrators feel safe. There are various ways of doing that. In high crime communities, I understand the concept of a school resource officer, SRO. In fact, I've spoken with a number of them across the state. they often have the same opinion, which is, listen, we're there to help protect the kids, but they want to be in the background. They want to be respected. When they're too visible, it actually negatively affects the psychology of the school and the students from what I've seen and gathered. So I think that we need to take a look at the roots of crime and what makes essentially a community and a school crime-ridden and unsafe, and really comes back to economic opportunity and what our education plan is, and talking about school student-teacher ratios and schoolroom class sizes. If we can make the right economic changes, we make the right educational changes, safety in the community around it should improve. Crime should come down. But we also have to support our officers. They have a very difficult job, one of the most in the whole state, as well as the teachers in urban communities. And we need to recruit better. We need to retain them better. We need to give them, I would call it hazard pay or just bonuses or whatever we need to do to be competitive to keep them there. And that is critical, both for our students as well as for the community around them.
Again, you can join us 888-720-9677 if you have a question for Rob Hotaling, the Independent Party gubernatorial candidate here where we live. We just have a few minutes. I wanted to paraphrase from someone who called in, but we're having an issue hearing from the caller in terms of your position on ranked choice voting. We talked about closed primaries, being an issue. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of ranked choice voting. In fact, think about this. Bob Stefanowski won because of ranked choice voting in the Independent Party. And then I came and defeated Bob Stefanowski with the same mechanism of ranked choice voting in the Independent Party. It works. Essentially what it is instead of you having one and only vote, it eliminates the spoiler vote concept. And it's, you know what, I'll rank them. And what people believe is that if you actually have ranked choice voting, more people would vote for a third-party candidate because they realize I'm not throwing my vote away. It essentially is an instant runoff. So I would rank Rob Hotaling first, right? And then Governor Lamont or Stefanowski second or third. And then, well, whoever gets the least without 50% win, that last person's votes roll up to the next remaining two, for example. And then you would re-vote immediately. It's an instant recount. It makes it greater for everybody. And if I understand this right, Governor Lamont and the Griebel-Frank for Connecticut party committed to introducing ranked choice voting bill at the next legislative session. So if I win the governorship, I would also meet that commitment of introducing ranked choice voting because it's the right thing to do.
We don't have that system right now. Some people might be listening and say, well, you are the third party candidate. If I vote for you, am I throwing out my vote? How would you respond?
I would say no. Once again, I'd go back to where we started. 41% of the electorate are unaffiliated for a reason. They are not Democrats. They are not Republicans. They control the fate. If the majority of the unaffiliated vote for me, it is not a throwaway vote. I win. It's that simple. So also, what could we do? Imagine, what has partisan politics really gotten us in the past 2 decades? You could argue we have a uniparty in the past 2 decades, right? Every senior role, highest office in the entire state are controlled by the Democrats. Are things better now? Think about it 4 years ago, 8, 12 years ago. Are things better for you? Just the same or worse? Clearly, I think things are showing we're not going in the right direction. CNBC, by the stats, we have the worst achievement gap. We have bottom 5 taxation, bottom 5 affordability. We have people fleeing the state in terms of retirees, graduates. All of that is due to a single party having control. Now, I understand the Democrats have some great ideas. That's great. But we need competition. Last time I checked, and I say this, and Lucy, in all honesty, name me an industry or anything where less choice is better. Well, you might say, come to my show. That you don't want any other show, I get that. But outside of your show, is there anything else anywhere in life where you say less choice is better? I don't think so.
Can I just, before we run out of time,
Sure.
you know, everyone talks about what's bad, especially when you're running for public office. But you've lived in Connecticut for a number of years. What's good about Connecticut? What makes you stay here and raise your family? People often say, well, retirees leave. Right. Retirees will leave regardless because they want to live somewhere warm. They don't want to deal with unpacking and dealing with snow. That's what we hear from people. And so I'm wondering if you can say, what's good about Connecticut?
Well, I'll answer what's good about Connecticut, but I want to get a chance to say why people are leaving, because I have one radical thought. It's radical, but it's new. I believe retirees People who've lived or worked in the state for 10 years or more deserve a defined benefit. They should have a public option. I've spoken to so many seniors who said they would not flee the state if their greatest expense is medical expense. If they had a public option, 65 or over, 10 plus years live or work here, they would stay. In fact, I have seniors out of state who'd say they would move here. It's not about heat. Don't get me wrong, I love Florida. It's very nice. But they would stay here. Now, what's great about Connecticut? Why have I stayed? I think Connecticut has great people. I believe Connecticut has beauty. I believe Connecticut has a great schooling system. We just have a terrible achievement gap. We fix our achievement gap, we're one of the best in the nation. We have a very educated, powerful workforce. Those are a lot of great things. And of course, proximity to New York. But I believe we need to invest in our cities to make them vibrant. Have people come here, make it not just a work destination, but a cultural destination. We have all the right bones. We just have to build out Connecticut a little bit better.
We're going to have to leave it there. The two segments went quickly. It was a pleasure to hear from you, to learn about your campaign, and good luck to you in about 33 days on Election Day. Rob Hodoline, again, is the Independent Party gubernatorial candidate. Thank you for coming in today.
Thanks a lot, Lucy.
You're listening to Where We Live on Connecticut Public. Up next, we're going to get analysis from longtime politics and government reporter Ken Dixon, who writes for Hearst Connecticut Media. You can join us too. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live.
Support comes from Hartford Healthcare. When it comes to heart and vascular care, their doctors are experts in valve procedures, rhythm disorders, heart transplants, and more. The heart of advanced cardiovascular care is at Hartford Healthcare's Heart and Vascular Institute.
Wondering how to get Connecticut Public Radio on your Amazon Alexa-enabled device? Just say, "Alexa, enable Connecticut Public Radio." Once enabled, you can ask Alexa to play Connecticut Public Radio anytime. To learn more, visit ctpublic.org/howtolisten.
An artist sets out to illustrate and elevate America's Black pioneers.
What I wanted was a collection of our accomplishments that we could just see for ourselves. We should know who our titans are.
One artist, hundreds of portraits. I'm Kimberly Atkins-Storr. That's on the next On Point.
Listen this morning at 10.
Make sure you have a full plate for Thanksgiving. Sign up early for our new foodie newsletter and for a chance to win a $250 gift card from New Morning Market. Visit ctpublic.org/contest to sign up today.
The Hartford Stage presents Agatha Christie's The Mousetrap. To enter to win tickets to the October 18th performance and for contest rules, go to ctpublic.org/contests. Entries must be received by end of day Friday.
This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. You just heard Rob Hodoline on the show, the Independent Party candidate running for governor. This November, he will be on the ballot. Candidates Bob Stefanowski will have the Republican line, and incumbent Ned Lamont will have 3 ballot lines after being endorsed by the Democratic, Working Families, and Frank Griebel parties. Now, for some analysis on Hodoline's campaign and the governor's race, joining us now in studio is Ken Dixon, who's the politics and government reporter for Hearst Connecticut Media. That includes the New Haven Register and the Connecticut Post. Ken, good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Sure, Lucy. Just take me over the coals now.
So I just want to hear your hot takes here on Rob Hodoline's campaign and what he shared today.
Who's a more attractive candidate? The problem is going to be getting the numbers out for him. But yeah, he had a little David and Goliath battle getting the nomination, and he's thoroughly briefed. He's got good experience. There's no money. This might be the only time that people see him on TV for the next, 35 days, did you say?
I said 33. Maybe I'm wrong.
33. You're probably right.
So let's talk a little bit more about his approach. He mentioned unaffiliated again, and you know this. I think the 930,000 unaffiliated voters in our state. It sounds like he's really appealing to them. I'm wondering if you can break that down for us when we think about this upcoming election. The governor's races have been close in recent years. In terms of, where will he be pulling votes from?
Lamont won by like 44,000 with all these extra lines. His second term over COVID. He's got a decisive advantage. Unaffiliated, looking at the polls, it seems like they're breaking more Republican than Democrat. Then you have to look in who's in the independent party. Is it disenchanted Republicans, disenchanted Democrats, and I'm not sure how that breaks down.
And it sounds like Chip Beckett, his running mate, and Rob Hotaling were once Republicans. So would they be considered the disenchanted Republicans who've now found themselves in the independent party?
Rob gave some money to Malloy in 2010, and he was talking about being in the Young Democrats back in the day. So I think he's got some bona fides on that. He's got a lot of interesting ideas, and an essentially unaffiliated governor coming into the the volcano of the General Assembly would be, interesting, and it would be up to the minority and the majority to try to work together with him. It could be interesting if he won, but the odds are way against it.
So you were able to hear the interview and some of the issues that he raised. What stood out to you?
He's super knowledgeable. He's got a scope of experience that arguably, the governor's, got 4 more years on him, but Stefanowski was a corporate guy. He spent the last 4 years as some kind of consultant that he won't tell anybody about, except he made, $30 million or something. Family guy, moved to Cheshire. He knows about the suburbs. I think he's a little Pollyannish about the affordable housing and educational cost-sharing battles that have been going on, for decades now. But, arguably, maybe that's what we need. Somebody, an outsider to work their will. I don't know.
Isn't that how Ned Lamont marketed himself or promoted himself as a business guy coming into state government when he ran?
Yeah, well, he also had the war in 2006 that he used to make Joe Lieberman become an independent, eponymous political party of his own there.
Let's talk a little bit about the education cost-sharing grant, because you've been covering the Capitol for many years, so you understand this better than the average listener. And so when you think about
That's sad.
Yeah, when you think about his ideas of saying that it's not the way it's structured is not working, so can you break it down for us on what he means there?
Well, it's true. The proof's in the pudding. Look at Westport. You don't even have to go to Westport. Look at Fairfield, right next door to Bridgeport. Rob said something during that debate with the governor and Stefanowski about paying teachers, urban teachers, and urban police more. And I think that's the kind of carrot that you need to attract people to the inner city, because there's. I know teachers in Bridgeport, and they're totally dedicated, and there's heartbreak everywhere. There are dysfunctional families and kids at risk, and more money might. A teacher in Bridgeport you look in Greenwich. It's like the parents are totally involved. The kids are arguably better trained, and they're paying more money. It's like it's kind of a no-brainer.
So we've got a little more than a month left. What do you expect to see in this gubernatorial race? I think Bob Stefanowski, the Republican, is starting a bus tour around the state. Ned Lamont's only doing 2 debates, and Rob Hotaling is trying to get as much face time as he can.
Well, you said it. Rob's he's going over to the Capitol right now to talk about education. He doesn't have any money at all. I mean, it's like I think he loaned his campaign like $40,000. And we've got campaign finance deadlines are coming up in the next few days. We'll get a better idea, but getting the message out, it's going to be really hard for him to break through. Lamont, the super PACs, Stefanowski, the super PACs, in the final stretch. Yeah.
What are you hearing from residents that you've encountered throughout the state when they look at this race? Again, some people would say that the pandemic may have been the best thing for Governor Lamont, considering he was pretty unpopular and there were some missteps. All I have to say is tolls, people remember before the pandemic. Others, he's gotten a lot of criticism about some of the restrictions during COVID. But, at the end of the day, Connecticut fared a lot better related to the way this public health crisis was handled versus other states. And so thinking about what residents want to hear from in terms of these candidates.
Well, what has he done for them lately? In COVID's almost old news now. It's becoming endemic. Although I wore my mask into the building here today, so I'm sure everybody felt slightly safer. Stefanowski's going to try to go more to the middle, and the pressure's really on him. Ned's, holding serve, and really the fewer debates, the better for the incumbent. I mean, that's why you're seeing, one debate between Blumenthal and Leora Levy, who's in a recent poll like 47% among independents, and she's like a Trump person. So that's an interesting finding in the poll.
We'll have to leave it there. Ken Dixon, politics and government reporter for Hearst Connecticut Media. I hope that was painless. Thank you for coming in.
I don't know, my nose is running right now.
Ken Dixon, thank you for your time on the show.
Thanks, Lucy.
Today's show produced by Tess Terrible. Kat Pastor is our technical director. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Thanks so much to the visuals, digital, and operations teams at Connecticut Public.